Welcome to #Love Yourself. I'm your host, Jobson, and I'm going to guide you on your personal journey towards self-love. Hi, my beautiful souls. Welcome back to #Love Yourself. On today's episode, we are going to talk about loving yourself clean and how cleanliness is related to loving ourselves and why and how we can more efficiently bring this aspect of love into our life and love ourselves through this aspect of being clean. All right. First off, I wanted to welcome you to season 3. It's been 4 years that I have been on my self-love journey and almost 3 years since I've started this podcast. And I've learned so much and I've shared so much with all of you guys. And I just really feel so honored that I've been able to assist so many people in like learning, but also like whatever part of the journey that they're on with their self-love. I've had so many people reach out to me through different avenues and just let me know how much the podcast has really affected them. And every time someone does, it just like reminds me how important it is to share this information. Because like I said, I started this journey almost 3 years ago because I wanted to learn to love myself better, right? And I knew that if I was going to share this information with other people, that I would learn it at like a more exponential rate. And I knew that I would probably do like a more like more research, like more in-depth, like learning than I would if I was just like naturally trying to do it on my own. Right. And so I started the podcast with the hopes that I would learn more, right? And like dig deeper, because I'd be doing a little bit from, other people, but also I didn't want to just learn this amazing information and keep it to myself. I wanted to like be able to share it in some way and fashion. So the podcast has been amazing on like both spectrums, like both ends of the spectrum of like, not only did it give me so much, in my journey to loving myself, but it also, gave so much out to the world, which I'm so thankful for. I love being a part of it. So thank you so much to all of my listeners and my subscribers. It's amazing to me that there's people listening all over the world. I get people sometimes that are, reaching out to me from like different countries, like I said, all over the world, saying that it has affected them positively. So thank you so much for being a listener and things that we don't normally typically think of when we connect with like loving ourselves, like kind of thinking outside of the box of things that are attached to loving ourselves, but we don't really see them blatantly, clearly in that way, right? We don't really put two and two together until we stop and think about it and unwind it. I start this season off with loving yourself clean, talking about how cleanliness. But yeah, if you're interested in following my vibe in any other way, I'll go ahead and leave that link in the description. You can follow me a little bit more. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into how to love yourself clean. And so it's interesting because you might think, how does cleaning my home, my car, my workspace, whatever, right? What does that have to do with? And the biggest answer to that is that love is an aspect of health, right? Or health is an aspect of when things are healthy, right? When they're dirty, they are, when things are dirty, and grimy, and become unhealthy, right? And that's where disease lives, and that's where unhealth lives, right? And so when spaces are clean, not even just our minds, right? We've talked a lot over the last few seasons of our minds being clean, right? Cleaning out like that negative self-talk, all that kind of stuff. But let's talk about some physical stuff, right? Let's talk about cleaning our physical space around us and what that's for our mental and our emotional space, right? Things in your environment are clean. It's been proven in statistics over and over and over again, not only with like, just like the simplest forms of like places where we try to get people to be healthy, they are held at a cleanliness standard, right? So like hospitals, think of that. Any type of care facility, right? Like those can't be dirty. And if they are dirty, usually they're not functioning well, right? And there's a reason for that. And we'll kind of go into more depth. But just in the first basis of why loving yourself is because that environments, right? How is that their mental health and their emotional health is correlated. And since that is the case, when we start to think about our space and our environment and us thriving, right? Like thought into about cleaning our spaces, and keeping our environment clean is not for everybody else. Like it's not just to like used when they come into your home or when they see it, but really it's for yourself, right? And I remember when I was younger, a lot of like the way that I would clean was like right before people would come over. And this is really, really common, right? It's like right before people would come over, I would like make everything spick and span. And like, that was a really good motivator to have people like having guests in my home was to get things clean, right? And it felt really good, once I cleaned it and everything, but it was a lot of work because I had maybe let things slip. And on the regular, it was interesting. It was like, I wasn't right. Or like, I knew that, the possibility of like a neighbor popping over or whatever. Right. And so let's talk today about loving yourself with making sure that our cleanliness habits are not great, like as a culture, to be honest with you. We have way too much, most people have way too much material items like that they don't need. We end up allowing that to just clutter up our spaces and clutter up our environments. And then that actually does have a toll and effect on our mental space. And we don't value the cleanliness and our mental health in connection to each other to the rate that we should, right? We don't value in our country and in our world predominantly, we don't value mental and emotional health to the value that we should. And so I don't want you to get into the shame and blame game, right? We're not doing that when we're loving ourselves about like, oh, I didn't get to my cleaning today, but I want to correlate and give you the information and the knowledge so that when you do clean, you're going to clean differently, right? And that maybe you will make it a different priority in your life because you're going to value yourself and you're going to value your mental health a little bit more. And so your cleanliness will be of a higher value to you after you understand this information, because that's what it was for me when I started to learn this myself. So I had to explain this to my son the other day about because I had to explain why do we clean, right? Because he was like moaning and groaning. And so have you ever had that for yourself where like you're like, okay, this Saturday I'm going to clean the house, right? Like it's the weekend, I got to get it done, right? This is the time. And then you wake up Saturday morning and you're like, you and your family are like, oh, I don't want to clean. I'd rather just go relax. I'd rather go to, out and play. I'd rather go do this. And so I had to explain to my son why we do it. And one of the things that I did was I showed him a picture of a really dirty, an extreme, right? That most people don't live in, right? But I showed him the extreme of a dirty home. And I said, okay, how do you feel when you look at that picture? And so I want you as the listener to the podcast to think back when your home was dirty, like maybe in an extreme for you, but like when it was messy, dirty, and gross. How did you feel? So take a minute to feel that feeling. Think back on that memory for yourself. And now you probably felt like icky. It feels kind of chaotic, right? It feels stressful. Most people, 76% of people report that when their house is dirty, their house is messy, it's not clean, that they do feel stressed. They feel stressed in their space, in their environment, right? So statistically, we're finding that it doesn't feel good. And even when you think about it, just that moment that you did that, it doesn't feel good, right? Now, I want you to think about back to when your home, right? Like a time when you cleaned it, when you spring cleaned it, when you mopped the floors, when you shampooed the carpets, when you cleaned the closets out, when you moved into a new space even, like when you move into a new home and spick and span, everything's super clean. How do you feel, right? When you're in that space, you feel good. There's a reason for that. And I'll explain that. I'll dissect that a little bit so that we can get to the bottom and we can really understand the healthy way to look at our environments and our home and correlate them to loving ourselves. Okay. It is because everything at the basis of it is energy, right? The chair that you're sitting on is energy. The table in front of you, your home is energy, right? It vibrates an energy, okay? And when things are messy, when things are dirty, right? When there's dust on things, and not to say like a speck of dust, but I'm saying like when we haven't taken the time to clean that, when our mirrors have smudges all over the place, like when things are dirty, there's dirt and there's grime, right? It is vibrating at a different level. And so when you clean, you feel different. It feels inviting. You feel inspired to be in the space, but also for whatever that environment is meant for. So like our bedrooms are meant for relaxing, or, the kissing time, right? For adults, right? But like, if it's all a mess, especially for like wives, like, I don't know about you, but I'd have a really hard time getting down if my room was messy. Like, that's just me, right? Like, wouldn't be able to focus. I'd be like, oh, gross. Look, there's laundry everywhere. Like, that would just bother me, right? And everybody's different, right? But that's the thing is, like, rooms and environments have purposes, and like, it's really hard, especially like a workspace. That's a really good one. A lot of people, it's hard to get to work when things are so dirty and disorganized. It's because the energy is chaotic and it doesn't vibrate at a good level, right? So now that we've kind of like tuned ourselves into like, of course, this is a real thing. Like, it's not just like this fake, like, I'm just like, trying to pass one on you, right? So that everybody's cleaner. No. Like, it'd be cool for the world to be cleaner, but that's not what I'm doing. I really am trying to like correlate for you how this is going to impact your life, right? And like I said, there's no judging, there's no shaming for anybody. Everybody's going to be at a different part of the spectrum, the cleanliness spectrum, right? You're going to live in a different spot than your neighbor. You're going to live in a different spot than your parents, even probably. I'll tell you this, I came from a family that most of my family, they're not that clean, right? And even from a small child, I remember being very, very different. Like, I had to have my bed made. I had to have my shoes in place in the closet. Like, I had to have everything like neat and orderly. I had a bedroom with my sisters down in a big old basement. So it was just a big room. And I remember my sisters were twins, okay? And so there was two of them against me, and I was like the little sister. And they were constantly like, there's clothes everywhere, toys everywhere, things just thrown in places. Like, it was not organized. So finally I had my stepdad like tack up a sheet on the ceiling so that I literally could separate my section. That was literally like, my bed was pristinely made. Like, everything had its own little space. My stuffed animals were in their like little like spot. Like, it was like, that's how I lived, because now that I understand the truth of what cleanliness is, right? I can understand why. It's because I've always just at a soul level vibrated to the energy of love and cleanliness. Cleanliness is an aspect of health and love. Okay. And so when you stop to think about the different places, right, that are clean that you've been in your life versus the ones that are dirty, right? I had to explain this to my son the other day that in places that are really, really dirty, it's easy for those families to be irritable, right? It's easy for those families to yell at each other because they're stressed out. Because like I said, people report that it stresses them out, right? It doesn't feel good to be in the space. Because your energy is off and chaotic, and it's not in the direction of health and happiness and joy and love and peace. It's not in that direction. It's in the opposite direction. So in the dirty places, that's where we find the unhealthy things, right? That's where we find people yelling at each other and cussing at each other. That's where we find people shooting up drugs and drinking, right? That's where we find people abusing one another, okay? And we've seen over time that those are correlated, right? Not to say that we never have seen, ever once in our time, the outlanders, where there could be like a really clean space with still that stuff in it, that there is, right? But on a majority level, like on the spectrum of cleanliness, right? And this, I guess, how would you say that? On the spectrum of health, right? Where health lives, usually cleanliness follows, right? Like that is, those usually, not always absolutely, there's going to be some outliers, right? But on a predominant level, that is the case, right? And so the reason for this, obviously, like, just like we talked about with the energy, and so how do we get that? How do we get back for ourselves, right? And that's what I want to like kind of hone into is like for me, especially, I remember, like I said, back in the day when I was kind of unhealthy, right? Or not kind of, I'm going to blatantly say when I was unhealthy, when I wasn't loving myself, I would live at a specific cleanliness level, right? And then once people were going to come over, boom, I would like rank up the stakes, right? And like make sure that it's like more. But why wasn't I doing that for myself? Like, why was I doing it for everyone else? And the reason mainly was because I was loving people, valuing them, valuing their health or relationship connection with me over my own mental health and my own emotional health, right? And so that's the thing that I want people to start to get really in sync with, is that we should be valuing this more, because it's directly related to how we are going to operate in our environments, right? It's going to be directly correlated to how we interact with others in our environment. Like I said, when you are in dirty spaces, the statistics skyrocket for people abusing, for people yelling, for people screaming, for people treating each other with disrespect. It's true. When you look at statistics, it shows that happens in dirtier places at a higher rate than it does in cleanliness, like in places that are clean, right? And so I want you to think about the next time that you're like, oh, I don't have time to clean my home, right? That could be a thing, right? You really could not have a lot of time to separate into all the different buckets of all the different things that are going on for you, right? That could be true. But I want you to remember that if you really put the value on the cleanliness, right, for yourself, that you will start to understand how valuable keeping your home and your environments clean are, not only just for everyone else to see and benefit from, right? Or to look good upon you. That's like our ego talking, right? Like that's our ego. That was back then when I was unhealthy. It was my ego wanting people to think highly of me, to think I was healthier than I actually was, right? That's really what it was if we want to dissect it, right? And that's where most people live, is like, we're not that healthy, but we want to put our best foot forward for everybody else to think that, right? And so if we really start to view cleanliness in a respect of health, right? It's our health that we're putting on the line when we're saying that it's not as important as going out and doing this thing, right? Whatever it is for you. It's going out and, shopping for this blah, 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 for this present for someone else, right? It's not as important as going to the gym. And I'm not saying going to the gym isn't important, but we need to look at like as a whole, like when you do a bird's eye view of your time, right? And you look at like the big picture of like, okay, I have this amount of time, right? Cleanliness and cleaning our environments should be up there, because our mental health and our emotional health should be at a high rank level too, right? And so it's this thing that I feel like we've really disconnected as a society and as a culture from one another. I really feel like we have like taken it and said like, oh, like it's not cleanliness is not about, our peace. And it's more about pride, right? And we're misplacing it. And I really just feel like I talked about in the examples of like, when you look at a clean place, or when you walk into a clean place. Have you ever walked into someone else's home and it's really clean? What do you feel? You feel really good to be there. You feel welcomed. You feel invited. You feel at peace. You feel at ease. And I think that's one of the reasons, right, why we as humans, we want to clean when we're having guests, right? Which is natural, right? Because we want them to feel welcomed, right? But what are you doing for you? Are you welcoming yourself into your home every day, right? Are you valuing the space and the environment enough to say that, that you should feel welcomed in there, right? And so I always think to myself, when I'm thinking about like cleaning these days, when I'm thinking about like the health of it, right? Of loving myself through cleaning my home, right? I always think about what our homes actually do for us. Okay. And I think about how amazing our homes actually are. And we actually don't value them to the extent that we should, right? Our homes do so much for us, right? Our homes not only shield us from the elements outside, which that in itself is huge, right? But think of just all of the technology that you have all over the home, right? You have lights that make us be able to be up at any hour that we desire to be, right? Because we can see then, right? We have heat and cooling, right? That like makes us comfortable, makes it convenient to be inside, right? And then we also have like our refrigerator, our stove, our microwaves, all the things, like our toilets even, right? It makes living so convenient that if we didn't have homes and all the technology that lives inside of them, we would spend most of our time focusing on staying, like our bodies staying alive and comfortable, right? Because we would be trying to find ways to regulate our body temperature, right? From the elements and shield ourselves from like the rain or the snow or whatever is going on in the weather, right? Or the heat, right? We'd be trying to find ways to shield ourselves from that. We wouldn't be having things be so quick and easy and convenient, like our meals and, like even our like going to the bathroom, right? It wouldn't be so easy. Everything is so convenient because of our homes. And so when you can really put that into perspective, that our homes are amazing, then you can really value it at a deep level, and you can really start to connect that to loving yourself. Like loving like your space and your home and being grateful for it is an aspect of loving that extension of you, right? And being grateful that you have that in your life, right? And if you've ever gone and had a point in your life where either you've been almost close to losing your home or been homeless in your lifetime, then you will know what I'm talking about at kind of a higher level than people that have just had it this entire lifetime for themselves, right? It's a really, really valuable thing. And sometimes since we live in them on a day-to-day basis, we forget how valuable and how amazing that really truly is. And so with our homes being, and even our cars, right? Our cars, like think about the magnificent inventions that those are. And like, okay, so I didn't have a car for a while. I got in a car accident. And so I didn't have a car for like months, right? And during that, me and my kids, we started to take the bus places. And I started to realize as I did that, being a mom and having children, and even we have like buses all over the place, like bus stops, like everywhere in my town, right? So it wasn't like it's inconvenient, it's convenient here. And even that, it took me hours to get places that are close by, that if I had my car, it would take me 5 to 10 minutes, right? And so trips that were normally 10 to 15 minutes were now 1 to 2 hours, right? With children on the bus. And then you get on the bus and it's not as comfortable on the bus and convenient because you're sitting next to people, or your children are sitting next to people that maybe aren't the level of safety that you feel, like comfortable with, right? And so that's the thing that you have to remember is like when you go without, then you really kicks in the value of those things. And so like our cars, right? Like that's another thing is like there's a lot of chaos in our car for a lot of people, right? And when you start to really recognize like, oh, the more that I love something, the more that I value it, the more that I'm grateful for it, the more that I care for it. And that's what I want to talk about too, is like when you're loving something, right? Just like when you love a child, you care for it, you nurture it, right? That means you keep it clean. You give your kid a bath, you give your body a bath, right? The same thing with our spaces. We forget that. We forget that a little bit, right? Or we're more relaxed on that than, and so I feel like we get further away from the direction of love. We just get more of like, compliant of like, oh, this is what life is, right? And so really take the time to not only like put it into perspective, the value of those things that really make our lives convenient, but how when you do pour love into them, right? How that actually really shines back and is an aspect of loving yourself. Like I said, like our homes and our cars, those are all extensions of ourselves, right? Like our environments end up to be extensions of us, right? And it trains and manipulates our energy in ways that really have an effect on our life and our lifestyles, right? And so since they do that, really love those spaces, love them, because when you are loving them, you are valuing them, you are nurturing them, you are caring for them, you are keeping them clean, right? And so not only is it going to feel good, we've already established that. Everybody in the world knows that when things are clean, they feel good. When they are organized, they feel good. It is simple, right? And we try to make it more difficult, or we try to make excuses for the fact that, we have like these habits maybe that are not as healthy as they could be, right? And so, like I said, I'm not here to shame or blame or judge anyone for any part of the scale of cleanliness that they live on. So that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to have you look around at your space and blame yourself and be like, gosh, I don't love myself, right? But I want you to accept reality. Like if you look around at your space and you really do an evaluation of like your car, your workspace, your home, and you look around and you don't feel good about the cleanliness level, right? Or even let's say you're satisfied, but you're like, you know what? I could love it more. And that's exactly how I came at it. Is I'm actually a really clean person. People tell me that all the time, right? Like I said, from a small child, I was this clean child, like that didn't fit into my family very well because they weren't as clean as me, right? I was like this oddball child. But when I like really started to learn that like love is an aspect, or no, sorry, cleanliness is an aspect of love. When I started to learn that, I started to look at like my place a little bit differently. I was like, well, I could dust more, right? I could clean underneath the entertainment center more often than I do, right? Like I could do a spring cleaning. It's spring. So this is the perfect time for this episode too, right? You could, I could, I was like, I could love my home more. I was like, and it does stress me out. Like when I go to bed, if I recognize like I've put everything away in the kitchen, I've cleaned everything, I've put everything away in the living room, like everything's in its place, right? But I didn't get to the floors, like I didn't get to sweep and mop, and like I go to sleep sometimes like kind of like, oh, darn it, right? And so since I have that and I know that about myself, like I have been rearranging my time and valuing my mental and my emotional health more to say I'm going to value that thing that I want, right? And so if you look upon your spaces and you're like, I wish my car was cleaner more often. Like I wish I would go to the car wash once a month and vacuum it out and wipe Windex on my windows, right? Like that's what I desire. That's how I desire to take care of my things, right? And there's always something, like there's always ways to love yourself more through your environments, right? And so take this as you're going to up the notch to loving yourself through loving your spaces and loving, like I said, the extensions of you, the places that you spend most of your time. We're in our cars, we're in our offices, and we're in our homes. That's where we make all of our memories, people. I mean, yeah, we go out and do other things in the world, right? But with our families, you're in your home, right? And don't you want to like not only like feel good when you're making those memories, but also to have the space of vibrating love, right? Vibrating a higher state of love so that when you do have those negative days, right? Where you had a crappy day at work, you come home and it's easier to just let that flow through you, bleed out of you, come out of you, and go back to the vibration of your space, right? Your primary space, which is your home, because it's not chaotic and it's not dirty and it's not grimy. It is a vibration and a representation of your love for yourself and for your family, right? So I know this was a little far reach when we talk about loving ourselves. I know a lot of people, they never would connect the two dots, right? But that's where I think I want this season 3 to go, is I really want us to take that leap into learning how things that maybe we don't necessarily connect together into how it's loving ourselves. I want us to bridge those gaps and realize those first stretches and talk about those in depth, because I think that those are just as equally important. Like, they're the things that are hidden behind the scenes, right? They're the things that are unsaid. They're the things that most people aren't going to talk about, right? Yeah, a lot of people, we've already gone over the boundaries. We've already gone over the abusive relationships. We've already gone over how to have positive self-talk, how to look in the mirror and love your reflection. We've talked about all the things that most people in society can understand conceptually. Now we're going to jump into season 3 and we're going to really focus on things that are going to stretch our brains, right? We're going to stretch our brains in the direction of loving ourselves at a higher level, at a higher rate, at a more depth. So if you're with me, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to share this love yourself information with everybody. And I thank you for joining me on my journey, because it's been probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. Ooh, it's making me emotional. It's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, was to start to learn how to love myself more. It changed my life completely, dramatically, and I will never, ever go back to not loving myself. So thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope that you are loving yourself too. Don't forget, take care and love yourself. Bye.